I have an engagement with a famous playboy in Chicago. He loves to flirt with beautiful and charming women. But I am plain and unremarkable and also a mute. During the wedding, he flirtatiously rubbed against a starlet in the audience. Their eyes meet. I gently took off my veil and placed it on the starlet's head. I raised my phone and displayed the words "happily ever after" in front of them. The room fell silent. Simon stood up in his suit and coldly embraced me, leading me away, whispering in my ear to comfort me. "Be good, Cynthia, don't cry, I'll take care of you." On the day I married Simon, Stephen angrily confronted me. "You used to endure everything, why stop now and cause a scene?" Simon broke his fingers. "I can't even bear to speak harshly. How dare you, a pampered young lady, expect me to endure you? I have a notebook filled with over 100 different women. They were all dumped by Stephen and unwilling to accept it, trying to force me to break off the engagement and give up Stephen. The woman in front of me was the 110th. She, like the others before her, was stunning. Unlike me, with plain and ordinary features, I handed her a tissue as she cried uncontrollably, "I'm sorry, I know I'm shameless, but I'm truly infatuated with him, as if I'm crazy." I stood up to wipe her tears, and wrote on a napkin, "It's okay." She suddenly broke down in tears. "Stephen was wrong, you're not disgusting or dull, you're a good person, you deserve someone like Simon, a gentleman, not Stephen, a smooth-talking womanizer. Cynthia, you can't outwit Stephen. He'll devour you willingly." I smiled gently and wrote, "I understand, thank you." Outside the window under the camphor tree, a high school girl in a white uniform was hiding from the sun. Soon, a young man, around 1.8 meters tall, arrived with juice, and they happily walked towards the high school together. Their shadows side by side stretched all the way into the darkness in my heart. My eyes became moist as I realized how long Stephen and I had been entangled. From our student days to now at work. I had spent 15 years, but still couldn't melt his icy heart. After a week, Stephen finally removed me from his blacklist. He questioned me, "Did you snitch on me to your brother again? You're mute, yet constantly causing trouble. Are you asking for trouble?" I hung up the phone and walked to the French window, where Simon was trimming branches in the yard. Previously, my mother brought Simon's prospective partners to meet him in the yard. When one person reached out to touch the flourishing flowers, Simon's demeanor changed from polite to cold. "These are Cynthia's favorite flowers, do not touch them." My mother's enthusiasm also faded. "My daughter has always been delicate, she loves flowers and plants. Miss Lee, it's best not to touch them." After that incident, my mother never brought any more prospective partners for Simon. I'm not my mother's biological daughter. She picked me up from an orphanage and raised me sternly but lovingly. In a car accident, Stephen's mother died trying to save my sister. I promised her I would take care of Stephen and be good to him for the rest of my life. I was injured in that accident, losing my ability to speak. Stephen resents me, I know. I intercepted Simon's warning to Stephen and pulled him back to our room. Stephen sneered, "You, raised in an orphanage, and someone like Simon, a business elite, how could he be so good to you?" He pinched my face, looking disdainful. "You're so ugly, he shouldn't even look at you." I shrank back. He pressed harder, making my chin red. "It hurt a bit. Why hide?" He frowned unhappily. "Do you know that because of you, William's stocks dropped? Simon sacrificed 1,000 just to mess with me for you. Cynthia, what do you have that makes him give up a businessman's rationality and interests? You lack looks, figure, your learning is average, and because you're mute, no one wants to hire you. You just hide in your room all day painting those ugly pictures of yours. There are thousands of people better looking than you in this world. I don't know what Simon is blind to see in you." Tears welled in my eyes. The insult was unprecedented and trembling shook my body. I tremblingly gestured towards him, refusing to back down. "These are not ugly paintings, I've worked hard to study, my art has won awards, I can support myself." He let go of my chin and slapped my hand as I gestured. "Are you insane? I'm not Simon, I'm not learning sign language for you. Stop bothering me, arguing with a mute like you is a waste of time." He left, slamming the door, warning me before he left, "Don't you dare complain to Simon, or I'll leave you." Stephen wanted to marry me early. Since he visited that day, I became passive and quiet. Simon, worried about me, set aside his work to be with me in the studio. Cynthia painted me so beautifully, Simon wanted to hang it up in the office for everyone to see Cynthia's excellent artwork. He smirked lazily and praised me generously, massaging my stiff fingers. Cynthia, smile for me. I forced out a smile even uglier than crying, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face. Only he praised me like that. He got flustered, quickly wiping away my tears. Cynthia, why are you crying? I shook my head. Simon is such a good person, he deserves someone great. Stephen was right, I am so plain and uninteresting, I have no outstanding qualities that would make Simon want to stay with me. Simon, let's get married, Mother said Selena, and you are a perfect match. His thin lips tightened and then relaxed, a mischievous smile playing on his lips, a hint of sadness hidden in his eyes as he casually deceived me. I like men, I won't get married in this lifetime. Our Cynthia has grown up, showing concern for her big brother. Cynthia is so sweet. I buried my face in his chest and wept silently. At first, Stephen wasn't so cruel to me, we got along well. In that car accident, Stephen's mother shielded my sister, while I was held tightly in my sister's arms. I was the sole survivor of that accident. Perhaps I would have died if Stephen's mother hadn't shielded me from most of the harm. I promised my sister that I would take care of Stephen. Stephen was the illegitimate son of the Williams family. After the accident, Simon helped me find 7-year-old Stephen and brought him back to the Williams family to acknowledge his roots. Their family members didn't dare to openly confront Stephen due to Simon's intervention, but schemes against him were frequent behind the scenes. Especially among the peers in the mansion, they looked down on Stephen's illegitimate status and never gave him any respect, deliberately excluding him. I was the only one who protected him. Stephen was cute back then, with a fair face, facial features ahead of his peers, despite his young age. Due to his status as an illegitimate child, Stephen faced constant disdain, causing his once cheerful nature to become silent and solitary, except when he dropped his guard around me and was reserved and cold towards others. The one who bullied Stephen the most was Helen. She liked Stephen's brother and took it out on Stephen to defend her crush. She tormented Stephen for nearly a decade. No one expected that after high school ended, Helen would confess her feelings to Stephen in a corner. Everyone, including myself, was dumbfounded by the unexpected turn of events. The abuser fell for the victim. Unfortunately, Stephen appeared aloof but was actually very sensitive. He wasn't a Stockholm Syndrome patient but a Scorpio. He held grudges. In front of Helen, amidst the onlookers, Stephen pulled me out of the crowd and said, I like her, not you, and I dislike you very much. Stephen bluntly expressed his disdain, not holding back. All of us who grew up together and had business dealings with each other's families were watching. Stephen held my hand tightly and his eyes were cold and hard. Who told you I'm mad at her? How dare she think I'd use Cynthia to get back at her? The atmosphere suddenly grew heavy as Stephen, dragging me, walked out, leaving Helen standing at the door with a resentful gaze on me. She heard Stephen's last words. Move. Stephen impatiently furrowed his brow, shouldering past Helen without hesitation. He was no longer the young boy she had pushed into a pool, almost drowning. Now, he stood tall, towering over Helen by 2 heads, emitting a strong presence. That day, Stephen, as usual, escorted me home. Before leaving, he leaned in close and said, Go in, girlfriend. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. I backed away in shock and saw Simon outside, preparing to park the car, his expression stern. Cynthia, come here. His rare stern tone compelled me to walk towards him involuntarily. Stephen's smile vanished, and Simon, in his suit and tie, stepped out of the car, took my bag, and led me inside the mansion. The atmosphere was tense, and Simon didn't spare Stephen even a passing glance. Helen hadn't left the house since that day, and we all tacitly avoided bringing up the incident. Until she suddenly announced in the group that she was going abroad, inviting everyone to her farewell party. She sent me a private message, her attitude no longer arrogant but polite, as if her account had been hacked. I'm going to England, can you bring Stephen with you? I did wrong in the past, I want to apologize to him before I leave. Cynthia. Give me a chance to make amends to him. It was at this party that Stephen completely changed. I was no longer the only person he would let his guard down with. He began to open up to everyone, expressing his kindness, but he became extremely impatient and disgusted with me when we were together. I once mustered the courage to ask him, What did I do wrong, Stephen? He smirked cruelly. You haven't done anything wrong, I just simply find you repulsive. Throughout the party, Steven and I sat in a corner eating snacks, mainly me while he brought them to me. After the party ended and all the guests had left, Helen, dressed in a glamorous evening gown, fluttered over to us like a butterfly. Steven, do you know why Cynthia has always been so kind to you from childhood? She smiled, proudly raised her chin, and vindicatively said, your mother was a mistress, thinking she could gain favor by bearing you, but she never expected that the Williams' illegitimate child would be all over the place. What are you, and why do you think you have the right to acknowledge your ancestry in peace? Everything is just because your mother saved Cynthia's sister in that accident, and Cynthia promised her sister to repay the favor. The White family hid the reason why Cynthia couldn't speak all these years. It was because she was the sole survivor of that accident and had suffered from post-traumatic aphasia. You, as a bastard, I wondered how anyone could consider you important and treat you so well. If it weren't for your mother owing her such a great favor, Cynthia might have felt you were too dirty to even look at. I wanted to deny it, frantically gesturing in sign language, but I couldn't stop Helen's rapid-fire words, so I pushed her away and dragged Steven away. Helen's maniacal laughter echoed in our ears. I might have taken an interest in you to spare your feelings. As a lowly, illegitimate child, even if I begged you, you won't be suitable to be our son-in-law in the next life. You were just a game to me, you took it seriously. So now I have to make you realize your place. Before getting into the car, Steven changed his tactics and gripped my hand tightly. Is what she said true? His face drained of color, breathing quickened, and red streaks appeared in his eyes. Speak. Even if you lied to me, I'll find out. I nodded and shook my head, desperately trying to speak, but no words came out, trying to pull my hand out of his grasp, but the other hand couldn't budge. He took a few deep breaths before suddenly releasing my hand with force, pointing a trembling finger in my face and chuckled through clenched teeth, "Get out of my sight." He pushed me away, hailed a taxi, and drove off in anger. I thought Steven knew about the incident, but it was only after I went to see Simon, and he investigated it that we discovered the truth about how the accident had been covered up by Steven's father. Steven's mother's status was too sensitive, and the accident had occurred on a main road with many casualties, attracting immediate attention when it was reported. Steven's father feared that if his mother's identity was revealed, it would negatively impact the Williams family's stock and the company's image, so he worked hard to suppress the news, spending a lot of money to quash the media reports. The Williams family was strictly warned never to bring up the accident in front of Steven. I tried to explain the whole story to Steven on my phone, but he didn't respond to my messages. Eventually, I realized he had blocked me. Simon informed me that the Williams were looking for people to help find Steven. And he also tried to reach out to him through contacts. I was worried sick, but Simon reassured me, "Where can you go to find him?" "Cynthia, stay at home, your brother will bring him back to you safe and sound." 3 days later, Simon found Steven in a bar, completely drunk. Simon settled his bill and brought him back to me. I couldn't help but notice the marks on Steven's neck and felt a twinge of jealousy. When he woke up, the first words he said upon seeing me were, "Get lost." He held his head, swaying, and left for home. The next time I heard about him was when he got into a fight at a bar over a girl. I went to the police station to bail him out. He hugged the pretty girl next to him and smiled at me. "She's my girlfriend, way prettier than you, and most importantly, she can talk." He leaned in towards me, with the same mischievous smile as before, but this time it felt much more malicious. Every day after that, I heard news about him, and 9 out of 10 times, it was about him having a new girlfriend. Everyone said he had a good eye for beauty and played around with a string of gorgeous women. Out of curiosity, I gathered pictures of the women Steven had been with and noticed his preference for stunning and seductive beauties that was completely different with Cynthia. He probably just liked that type, and previously he only felt grateful towards Cynthia for being there for so many years. The messages in the group chat kept coming, and Simon took my phone, exiting the chat. "Cynthia, don't torture yourself." He stopped his work and took me on trips around the world. During that time, I completely lost touch with any news about Steven. We were in different cities during university, and I thought we had lost contact forever when Steven decided to go abroad. It wasn't until after graduation when he came back from France and asked to meet me. "Cynthia, how do you plan to repay what you owe me?" "You owe me a life, and you may never be able to repay it." It had been 4 years since we last met, and he was like a different person. There was no familiarity left in him, the sly and drifting aura mixed with a gentle and elegant face, making him stand out. I remained silent, biting my lips. Stephen was right. It was indeed a debt of life, attached to my sister, and I was a beneficiary. I couldn't repay it, and I would owe Stephen forever. But if I had a choice, I would rather have died in that car accident. The burden of responsibility was too heavy, and I couldn't bear it till he suddenly got close to me, his fingers brushing my ear in a suggestive manner, his voice low and filled with teasing. "How about you marry me?" I couldn't believe it. He pulled back his hand, rubbed it subtly, and chuckled. "Don't think too much. My dad just forces me to marry into Selena's family." He squinted, and his eyes lit up mischievously. "No matter how powerful her family is, it's nothing compared to your brother's power. Since we are marrying, why not find someone who can help me the most?" He suddenly stopped smiling and looked at me with resentment. "I know you and Simon like each other, but I don't want things to go well for you too. If I can't live happily, neither can you. Cynthia, are you disgusted? You share a household with your brother, he's practically your real brother, and yet you still want to marry him? You are just a White's adopted daughter. Do you think Simon's parents will agree? Besides, if it gets out, Simon will face judgment, and you already know what that would be like. Think about it. Don't be so selfish." Despite the blood on my palms from squeezing too hard, I couldn't feel the pain. After Stephen finished speaking, he left, leaving me sitting alone in the shop, feeling cold. The phone rang. It was a message from Simon. "Cynthia, come back early, Big Brother is almost done cooking." My stiff fingers moved, tears hit the screen as I typed back the words, "Okay, Big Brother." On the day I married Stephen, he was in an extremely good mood, greeting guests and even showing a rare kindness towards me. He approached me, smiled at me, and his smile surprisingly reminded me of how it used to be in high school, purely gentle. "Cynthia, we are getting married." His drunken words actually made me hear a hint of sadness. He caught a glimpse of my empty hands, and his expression turned cold. "What about the bracelet I gave you when we got engaged? Who did you give it to?" "Who?" He couldn't contain his anger. "The younger sister from your third year you were dating before," I replied, unable to bear it anymore. Thinking he would be embarrassed, I was mistaken. He got even more aggressive. "You are really generous, Cynthia. If a mistress came knocking on the door, would you also give them a gift? Would you provide me with condoms for when other women climb into my bed after we're married?" I remained expressionless. "If you need them, I'll order takeout for you." He let go of my hand, gripping the cup so tightly his knuckles turned white, clenched his jaw, and with a chilling gaze, smiled sweetly at me. "I have a wife to sleep with. If you need any takeout, it would probably be your Simon. I heard the Whites have been looking for potential partners for him. You'll have a sister-in-law soon. You should be happy, right?" I calmly replied, "Certainly, I am pleased. After all, my brother is an exceptional person, and whoever matches him will be equally outstanding. Why wouldn't I be happy?" His false tenderness could not be maintained, and he let out a heavy sigh. As the master of ceremonies was energetically reciting the unchanged wedding vows, Stephen suddenly went off script, pulling the guest performer off the stage. "Thanks for coming, you're giving me face." The guest performer was Helen. She had returned from studying abroad and entered the entertainment industry in her home country. I never could have imagined that Stephen, who used to despise her, was now openly flirting with her. Business figures and numerous paparazzi graced today's wedding, and Simon's expression was grim. I suddenly understood Stephen's actions. He was intentionally seeking revenge on me, on Simon. He wanted to embarrass the entire White's family in public. And I was the tool to disgrace Simon. The media was sure to capture Stephen touching Helen's waist. And if it got out, I would be ridiculed. What kind of bride would tolerate her husband openly flirting with another woman on their wedding day and continue with the wedding? My gaze met Simon's below, and his eyes showed no blame, only anger towards Stephen and heartache towards me. I had always been timid, but over these years, Simon had protected me, taking care of me in every possible way. This was the first time I had been so bold. I took off my veil. To the surprise of everyone, under Stephen's shocked gaze, I took careful steps towards Helen and placed the veil neatly on her head. Stephen's face turned ugly. "Are you out of your mind?" I raised my phone and pointed to the words "Happy Wedding" that I had typed. The scene fell silent, and Simon stood up in his suit and tie, cold-faced, took me in his arms and left, whispering comforting words in my ear. "Don't cry, Cynthia, I will always care for you." I buried myself in his embrace, soaking up his warmth, breathing in his comforting scent. I realized I was selfish. I couldn't fulfill my sister's final wishes anymore. From the moment Stephen intended to hurt Simon, everything couldn't continue. I could tolerate Stephen's misunderstandings and his anger towards me, but I couldn't accept any harm towards Simon. This was Simon, who had raised and cared for me, forever biased towards me. No one was allowed to harm him even a bit. Stephen made numerous calls to me, but I didn't answer. The paparazzi who left the wedding venue that day only had images leaving. Their cameras were confiscated on site. Even Helen received a warning, and this grand wedding disappeared without any news. No one dared to discuss it. That night, Stephen's father came to my house with Stephen to apologize. His father hadn't spoken yet, but Stephen rushed toward me like a madman. "Cynthia, are you messing with me? Don't forget. You and your sister owe me a life. If it weren't for my mother, both you and your sister would be dead. I would rather die than have any involvement with you." I looked at him calmly and typed a few words. "What did you say?" He raised his voice, his eyes red. I knew then, Helen wasn't wrong. It was all fake. Everything you did for me in the past was all fake. His father stepped in and gave him a resounding slap across the face. Unable to hold back any longer, he revealed the truth from years back. "The car accident was orchestrated by your mother. She couldn't connect with the people in that circle. She got to know about Cynthia and her sister being adopted by the Whites. She deliberately approached them in the orphanage. Your mother wanted to use the Whites to get you into the Williams family, forcing me to accept you." Stephen's father offered an apology to Simon. "Simon, I brought him here today to sever our father-son relationship. Initially, it was your face that made me let him return to the Williams. You can't target us because of him." Stephen broke down, grabbing his father, eyes red and disheveled. "This can't be. Absolutely impossible. Are you lying to me?" He kicked his father away, trying to grab Simon's clothes, but was restrained by the bodyguard. He shouted desperately, "It's you, Simon. It's your deceitful scheme. Impossible. My mom would never do such a thing." He burst into laughter. "Simon, you despicable person, you would do anything to get Cynthia, even make my dad lie. You guys are siblings. Siblings who crossed the line. I can't have her, and neither can you. You will never be able to be with her. You're her brother." Simon silently pursed his lips, his eyes full of silence. These were the only words he couldn't refute. "I can choose not to get married." I raised my phone. Marriage is just a form of expressing love. If two people love each other enough, why should they care about this form? Simon and Stephen looked at me together, the former in sorrow, the latter in madness. Stephen muttered to himself, "You're insane, you're truly insane." He struggled to break free from restraint. "Cynthia, I won't allow you to be with him, I won't." Simon picked me up and went upstairs, stepping on the carpeted stairs silently. "Cynthia, it turns out we've always loved each other." He choked a little, with a hint of joy and more contentment. "If I die now, what's the big deal?" His tears fell on my forehead. He breathed patiently, and with a joyous tone, he laughed. "I've never been this happy before. Cynthia, I've never been this happy." He no longer referred to himself as a brother. Perhaps he thought that even if this were all a dream, he might wake up tomorrow. But for this moment, he wasn't a brother, he was Simon. Simon could openly express his love for Cynthia. Simon could only show sisterly love to Cynthia. Any more would cross the line. He couldn't cross the line. It would scare his sister, embarrass his parents, and tarnish the Whites' reputation. The news eventually reached the mother, who came to the villa to see me while Simon was away. I found it hard to look her in the eyes. She handed me an agreement. A document to revoke the adoption relationship. "You can change back to your original surname." I signed my name with a pale face. "Mom, rest assured, I won't disturb Simon anymore, and I won't let the Whites be ashamed." That day with Simon, no, both of us were irrational. Stolen happiness will eventually be taken away. My mom looked at me speechlessly. "Why be ashamed?" "I'd only be ashamed if there were no grandchildren. He's almost 30 and still not married, that's the shame. If one of you could talk to the elders, I would have been a grandma long ago. Do you two think that the whole world is against you, this unfortunate couple?" I stood there stunned. "Less melodrama, don't direct and act, don't indulge in TV dramas, don't portray me as a wicked mother-in-law, okay? Get married soon, all right?" Simon rushed in from outside in a hurry, without even changing his shoes, standing in front of me. "Mom. It's my fault. Talk to me. Why embarrass Cynthia? He caught a glimpse of the document revoking the adoption agreement on the table. Veins bulged on his forehead. He grabbed it and tore it apart, coldly throwing it on the floor. Mom, it's my fault. Why drive Cynthia away? You've raised Cynthia for so many years. Don't you have any feelings for her? Was your love for Cynthia all fake before? This is my fault. Why not confront me? Why drive Cynthia away? I'm the one to blame. Half an hour later, the secretary brought in a new agreement. Simon stood behind the couch, smiling as he massaged his mother. Mom, you should have talked to me first. It's so awkward. Mom chuckled. It is quite awkward. You've always been so polite. It's rare to see you lose your composure. If you had lost it earlier, maybe I would have been a grandma already. You're good at hiding your emotions. Simon fell silent. You know, I left my mom when I was young, stayed with my old-fashioned father. His mom was speechless. On the day of my marriage to Simon, the long-lost Stephen somehow found out and pushed past the security guard, grabbing me with red eyes. Why didn't you endure before? Why cause a scene now? Simon twisted his finger bones. I won't even bother saying harsh words. Be careful with the delicate darling raised by pampered parents. Why should I endure you? Stephen seemed unfazed by the pain. Cynthia, let's not fight. How could the Whites ever agree to your marriage? You're testing and provoking me. Cynthia, I haven't been with those women. I was just upset. I intentionally wanted to make you angry. I couldn't stand that your kindness towards me was mixed with ulterior motives. The tears welled up in his eyes. Cynthia, I know I was wrong. Let's live well in the future. I won't act up again. Cynthia. I will sign that I lied to you. I've learned sign language for you a long time ago. Give me another chance. Let's start over. I shook my head, fingers slowly and firmly gesturing. No, I love Simon. I don't want to start over with you. At first, Stephen didn't believe his father's words until his father showed evidence from the past. Stephen went berserk, smashing things, and then disappeared. The Williams were originally one of the top families in the business world. Since the elder brother's death, Stephen had become the prince of the family. His father doted on him completely. After Stephen disappeared, his father selected a promising illegitimate child from a group, preparing him as the heir. His father had hoped that this news would bring Stephen back, but Stephen was gone for months. It wasn't until my wedding that he reappeared. Stephen cried bitterly. Cynthia, I went to the place we used to play as kids. He dragged on Simon's sleeve, and he let the security guard escort Stephen back to the Williams. I never wanted to see that person again. Simon gently squeezed my hand. Cynthia, don't be afraid. As long as you are here, why should I be afraid? During our honeymoon, we received a letter from Stephen, which Simon didn't destroy privately. He handed it to me without hesitation. Stephen had it delivered. I threw it into the fireplace. The paper curled and turned to ashes instantly. He pulled my hand away unhappily, hot. I closed my eyes in his embrace, rubbing against him. From then on, it was all good days.